You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. There it is, folks. It's not official until the opera lady says it's official. thechrisvossshow.com. Welcome to another episode. We certainly appreciate you guys. I hope you're passing around the Chris Voss Show, because the Chris Voss Show gives you that wonderful glow. The family that loves you but doesn't judge you. We're not a cult. We're not an MLM, but you do have to have 5 relatives in your downline. Please refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, youtube.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, and Chris Voss 1 on the tickety-talkety over there where the kids are. 15 years we've been bringing you the smartest and most brilliant minds. None of them are me, of course. That's why we have guests on the show. We can say you have smart people around here. Billionaires, CEOs, the White House advisors, the astronauts. You've seen them on the Chris Voss Show. And always the latest and hottest authors, just pumping out the greatest books. They're going to improve your life and your mind. Because remember, stories are the owner's manual's life, as Chris Voss used to like to say, as if I can quote myself in the third person and people won't think I'm completely insane. But if you've been here for 15 years, you know that I am. We have a gentleman on the show who is a multi-book author. He's going to be talking to us about his latest book and some of the insights that went in behind it. Gerald Schoenewolf is on the show with us today. His latest book is called The Mass Killer, 6 Case Histories That Tell Us Why. So this should be very interesting. Just came out July 28th, 2023. He is a New York State licensed psychoanalyst. Maybe you can tell me what's wrong with me. Well, we don't have that much time. We only have like half an hour, not 10 years. He's a former adjunct professor at the Borough of Manhattan Community College, and author of 30 books, count them, an award-winning screenwriter and filmmaker. He was born in Fredericksburg, Texas, a small town where everyone spoke German. Do they still do that? And he came to New York at the age of 19. He's worked in New York ever since. His books include 14 works on psychology, psychoanalysis, as well as other nonfiction works, also 9 novels, and a book of poems and drawings. His book, Jennifer and Herselves, was a top paperback seller in its first edition by Dell. I think one of my personalities is named Jennifer. Let's see. His screenplays won first prize in film festivals in the USA and the UK. He's been in finals in several other festivals. He produced and directed 2 of screenplays, Therapy and Brooklyn Nights. He published all of his novels himself, and he joins us here with his latest book, The Mass Killer, 6 Case Histories That Tell Us Why. Welcome to the show, Gerald. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for inviting me on the show.
Thank you for coming on the show as well, Gerald. So give us .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs, sir?
Well, I have a website called drschoenewolf.com.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a site that has all of my books on it called the livingcenterpress.us.
Okay. And so people can go there and check out your book.
By the way, there's also a site called themasskiller.com.
Ah, that's a good one to have. That's a great title too for .com. It's hard to find .com titles like that. So you've written 30 books. What motivated you want to write this book?
Well, I was just disturbed, like I guess most of us are.
I'm deeply disturbed, actually, but not about your book, but yeah.
Yeah, I was disturbed about how many mass killings there are, mm-hmm. and how they keep mushrooming. Like the 70s, we had maybe 1 or 2 mass killings a year. Mm-hmm. But right now, this year, we're having them almost every other week. We have twice as many mass killings as any other country.
Mm-hmm.
All those things caused me, and I didn't like the explanation that other people were giving for why we have these mass killings. So I decided to do a study myself and see where that led me, which it led me to a different place than most people.
And you're, of course, using your background in psychology, psychoanalysis, and digging through those. Why did you pick these exact 6 case histories that you cite in the book?
I picked them because I thought they were representative of mass killers. You know, they all had things in common. Mass killers are generally young men, generally young white males, although there are exceptions. They generally suffer from depression and hopelessness. They have a lot of rage. All of them have a great deal of rage inside of them. And in my book, I came out with a new theory about rage, wherein I categorize 3 categories of rage. Rage 1, which is someone who has rage but is still functional. Rage 2, which is somebody who is scarcely functioning and the rage is leaking out in different places in their lives. And then stage 3, the rage is built up so much that the person cannot contain it anymore, and it explodes out in a mass killing.
And so those are the functions you identified these with. Are these 6 case histories the 6 worst killings in America, or?
Yes, they one of the killers, the man who killed 61 people in Las Vegas at a festival. I think 61 is the highest rate of mass killings.
Sadly, yes.
He's in the book.
And he was wasn't he different than a lot of mass killers you see nowadays? Most seem to be very young, kind of incel teenagers or young men. I thought it was kind of interesting that he was kind of older. I mean, he's kind of our age.
Yes, he was older. He was different from that point of view. But he shared most of the other traits. For example, he was an externalizer. I'm sorry, an internalizer. An internalizer is someone who holds on to their anger. And so the anger just builds up inside of them. They never learned the skill of handling their anger as it arises. A healthy person, takes care of their anger as it comes up and it goes away. These people are not able to do that, so it just festers inside of them and builds. He was similar to many others that I've written about in the book.
There you go. Now, do you break down whole profiles, psychological profiles on these 6 people? Do you psychoanalyze them in the book and say, here's are you able to identify there's a point where they stepped off the map and started going down that dark road that many people don't take?
Yes. Each of the 6 case histories starts out with the narrative of the killing itself. So I found all the details I could about each of the killings, and I dramatized it because I'm also a novelist. Yeah. So I dramatized it. Then I went to their childhoods. I tried to find as much information as I could about their childhood. So the next section is what happened, how they were born. For example, one of them was this Korean guy at Virginia Tech who killed about 23 or 4 students. His childhood was all of these people had traumas in their early childhood. Yeah. And for him, what happened was his mother, he was born in Korea, and his mother was matched. His mother was forced by her father to marry this man she didn't like. She was an educated woman, and he was a blue collar worker, who had nothing in common with her. And so then she had to marry him, and then she right away was forced into having children. First was a girl, and then the second one was the man Chow, who I wrote about.
Mm-hmm.
And he, when she had him, she had postpartum depression. Postpartum depression is a very, very traumatic thing for a child, because when a woman has postpartum depression, it means she doesn't pick up the baby. She lies in bed all day, depressed.
Oh, wow.
She doesn't pick up the baby when he cries. If she does pick him up now and then, it's with an angry face. And a baby feels those vibes. It feels the angry face. It feels the anger in the body posture and in the way the mother hugs the baby. The mother doesn't hug the baby with tenderness.
Wow.
When they're going through this depression. So when this happens, a mother can go into this kind of depression for months or maybe even a year. And research has shown that such babies end up with a lot of developmental arrests. There's one theory that says that autism is caused by this. And this boy did develop a kind of autism, and he could not really relate to anybody. Couldn't relate at all. So that led to his growing up very, very disturbed and unable to negotiate any kind of relationships. He was an isolated person.
And which one was this one?
This one was like in the, I think around the late 80s or early 90s. Maybe later. I wrote the book about a year ago, so I'm
okay. So the name. So your thesis in the book is that guns don't kill people. It's people who have an urge to kill, and the urge to kill is brought on by either an emotional disturbance or cultural disturbance, or both. And you believe, correct me if I'm wrong, because it's kind of a question to set up for you, that guns aren't the problem because we've had guns since 1781, according to the thing here in the Second Amendment. It's this urge to kill and this disturbance that seems to be prevalent. What's causing this? What are the mass killers products of, according to your book?
Well, I want to just address about guns first.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. Guns have always been available, but mass killings have been a recent phenomenon that started out in the 70s, and it's the last few decades. And people think, well, if we banned all guns, then that would stop the mass killings. I don't think so. I think mass killers are madmen, and they would get guns from the underground. They get them wherever they could get them. So they're just disturbed people, and it's not guns that do the mass killings. It's the disturbed people.
That's true. There's a lot of people that have guns that don't go on mass killings. Now, and I was reading earlier from you the bio in the book, the description of the book. So I want to make that clear. Also in the description of the book, you state that mass killers are the products of dysfunctional families and dysfunctional cultures. The traumas of childhood and frustration living in dysfunctional culture is what's leading to the eruptions of mass killings. So do I understand that correctly? That's the premise of your book. And what are these dysfunctional families? It seems like every family these days is dysfunctional. Is there something special about the makeup of certain families, and what part of our culture is the dysfunctional? I'm asking you. I probably have some guesses, but what, according to your research, what is the dysfunctional portions that are contributing to this?
Well, I think dysfunctional families are in all walks of life.
Yeah.
Um, I think that as we became a a happy, successful culture,
Hmm.
and this happens to all cultures, I think, throughout history. When cultures start to become successful and have more leisure, uh, then they start to decompose. The things that held them together in the beginning start to fall apart, and so adults are more interested in doing other things than parenting. Parenting is a lot of work. It's a complicated thing,
It is a lot of work. Yes.
right?
Yeah.
You,
Yeah.
you have you Are you a parent?
No, I'm not. That's why I'm not a parent, actually, because I'm lazy.
But it's a lot of work, and it's probably one of the most complicated jobs that anybody can do.
I'd agree.
You have to be healthy yourself to be a good parent.
And most people aren't. They don't prepare for it, and they just drag whatever sort of traumas they have from their childhood.
Right, right. So I think parenting has and families have deteriorated.
Mhm.
One more than one third of families are one parent families nowadays,
Yeah.
and that doesn't work.
That brings me to an interesting theory that people have about this sort of thing. We've seen, and I don't know if you've studied this, but we've had people like Warren Farrell on the show with his book, The Boy Crisis: Why Boys Are Struggling, and we're still seeing it now, where boys, the rise of this incel generation. We're seeing boys not going to college anymore, not interested in becoming providers and protectors. We're seeing an increase in single women that can't get into relationships. It's projected by Morgan Stanley that childbearing women between the ages of 25 to 44 won't be in relationships or have kids by 2030, and the prospects don't look good for them if they want to try and have a family after that. Since the 60s, we've seen the increase of divorce rates in single parent homes, particularly single mother homes, since that time. And if you study the rates of people who are in prisons, people who have all sorts of social problems, they come from single parent homes. And a lot of these, according to Warren Farrell, and a lot of the studying you can do on some of these killers, is an absentee of fathers. Do you think that, I don't know if you've read any of this sort of studies, or you find that these hold any weight to the bearing of what caused these killers to be triggered?
Yes, I think those are definitely facts. As I said, I think it's more than a third of families have one parent, and it's usually the mother, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And absentee fathers, it's a big problem, because boys who grow up without a father, they don't have someone to model how a man should behave. And even bad fathers are better than no father most of the time.
That's true. That's true. Or at least that's true in my opinion. And from what I've seen and read, the other thing is we've moved more towards, without alpha fathers in the home, we've moved towards an emotionalist society, where, if when you and I grew up, we didn't have to put warning labels on stuff. You just kind of had to know in a Darwinism form that if you jumped off a bridge, it would kill you. You didn't have to have a sign that said, if you jump off this bridge, it will kill you. If you wrap your head in plastic, it will kill you. We didn't have to have any of that, because we either just knew, or, it sounds harsh, but Darwinism would fix the problem with the people who are too dumb to figure it out. And probably, I hate to be mean, but that's kind of what Darwinism is for, is to flush out the weak and embrace the strong. But we seem to have moved from a society that's like that since the 60s, where emotionalism rose. And we went from a logic and reason society to an emotionless society. And these boys, instead of being programmed with fathers and alpha fathers in the home who taught them logic and reason and a stoic sort of control of their emotions, that they became more feminized, these young boys, especially if they don't have a father in the home. And in doing so, they tend to act out in their rage. I mean, there's a reason these are young boys always doing this. There's a reason these boys are usually incels, so they don't have relationships that are healthy with women because they've never had a father to show them how to, be set in your ways, maybe how to date and stuff. Do you think there's any merit to the theory that I'm suggesting?
Oh yes, I think there's a lot of merit to it. I think that I have to say something controversial. I think, and this was in my book, that the feminist movement has been destructive to the family and to boys. I mean, I think a lot of mothers, feminists talk about toxic masculinity and things like that. And I think that that's a model that many, many women follow. And so there's a new double standard now with regard to girls and boys. Boys are seen as toxic as soon as they're born and treated that way.
And told they're toxic by their teachers, which are largely females now. I mean, males have left the business of teaching. We've had psychologists like yourself, child psychologists, who come on and said, yeah, the schools aren't a healthy place for boys anymore.
I don't think they're healthy for anybody, not for girls. Because they raise, narcissistic girls, who don't know how to have a regular relationship with a man.
And social media probably contributes to that as well. The stats are real. I mean, if you pull the stats, these are according to the U.S. Bureau of the Census and Department of Health. 90% of all homeless and runaway children are from fatherless homes. 85% of all children exhibit behavioral disorders come from fatherless homes. This is the U.S. government, Disease Control, Center for Disease Control. 85% of you sitting in prisons grew up in a fatherless home. They're literally filling our prisons. You wonder why our prisons have exploded? This is it. You wonder why the shootings have exploded? This is likely it. 80% of rapists motivated with displaced anger come from fatherless homes. 75% of all adolescent parents in chemical abuse center come from fatherless homes. 71% of high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. 71% of teenage pregnancies come from children of single parents. 70% of juveniles in state-operated institutions come from fatherless homes, and 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. Those are facts. So I think you're right that these dysfunctional families, fathers not in the homes, fathers being removed in the homes, is a real problem. I was writing about this today that. I hear this from people that go, I can be both parents. I can be the father and the mother. We don't need one of us. I can do both. What do you think about that sort of mentality?
Well, that's a rationalization.
Yeah.
So obviously, you're very informed on all of this. You just quoted all those statistics, which are true.
Yeah.
So there's the problem with the family, dysfunctional families, but then the young man grows up in a culture that is dysfunctional. We have a culture that's divided, but it's like violently divided. I talk about how this got started in the book. I believe this got started with the Vietnam War. That's the first time that liberals started to protest in violent ways. The Vietnam War protesters, students usually, started taking over campus buildings, and the police would come and they'd throw bags of shit at the police, or bags of urine or rocks or whatever, and people got killed. That was the first time we had violent riots. Before that, it was peaceful protests. After that, the other movements, the Black rights movement, the feminist movement, gay movement, the transgender movement, they all followed suit. They all had violent protests, and they all they didn't try to use constructive language. Martin Luther King used constructive language when he was organizing his peaceful protests, but the constructive communication went out the window. So eventually, as the liberals and militant liberals started to become more violent, then there was a backlash from the conservatives. It takes two to fight, and so yes, both sides have been fighting, and and this divide affects everyone in the country, just as if you have a family where the mother and father are divided and fighting, it affects all the children.
Yes, most definitely. I mean, I can sit across from people, and I can see traumas. I can tell you if you grew up with your mother or father, I know what abandonment of father or mother looks like. And I can see a whole life and go, here's where that was affected. Here's where that affected. And I'm sure you can too. I've studied this a lot because, it's been interesting to me to try and understand why these shootings are happening, why they're increasing. I think you're right. We moved from a society that went from something that was logical and reasoning to more of an emotional society, as I said before. Let me offer you this theory too. In the 60s, we saw the rise and the starting of the collapse of the family unit, and we saw the right. And you can go right to the charts and the facts on this. So if you think it's my opinion, and you're out there hearing that and believing that, go pull the charts. Everything starts to go off the rails in the 60s. Family unit breaks apart. The rise of single parent. The divorce rates, it all begins there, and in the people's interest in their, we're all animals. Our internal paradigms are to breed, are to procreate and make families, especially as men. We have a paternal sort of protector sort of thing that we get off on, protector, provider. And when we get success, we go and form families. In fact, we usually marry who's ever in front of us at the point that we're at. When people can't, when people aren't mating, when people aren't getting together, when people aren't seeing a future together, and being able to exercise or chase down their biological function to procreate, I think they get angry and violent whether they realize it or not. Do you think maybe that sort of sentiment that started settling in the 60s is what kind of led to that violence?
Yeah.
It's kind of a side, what do you call it? It's not a direct thing, but it's a side thing. Like, I think a lot of the incels now, that's the reason they're angry, and you're seeing them shooting stuff up.
Well, I think it's love and power are on opposite sides. If you're able to love, if you're able to be attached to other people and experience love, you don't need power. But if you don't have that, the more you don't have love and affiliation in your life, then the more you're going to look for power. And the people who join these groups, like the Black rights group and the feminist group and gay and transgender, they're doing it for power. They're people who are not able to function normally in their lives or have love and affiliation. So, love nurtures, but if you don't have it, then you seek power.
Yeah, because you're trying to reestablish the balance of a masculine and feminine, and you're breeding paradigms. We basically have this need to breed and procreate and create families. It's everything. It's why we do everything. For a young man, the reason you get a job, the reason you buy a car, the reason you dress nice, the reason you shape your whole life is so you can provide for a family, so you can attract another woman. And I believe women, they do the same. They spend all of their time trying to figure out how to attract men. And it's because we have these internal drives that we are supposed to propagate the species. And, you can put all the fancy stuff on top of it, but that's our drive. But I think I'm not sure that I would blame it completely on the liberals or Black people or LGBTQ. I think generally people, if they cannot achieve their paradigms to breed and grow, then that's their issue, because these are mostly white boys. That's the other interesting thing about it. Now, conversely, I'll have people argue with me about, what we've been talking about in stats so far. And they go, yeah, Chris, but every kid who has a single mother doesn't go out and shoot up a school. And so somewhere there's a separation between, kids that grow up with this thing and then kids that really go off the deep end. Where do you think is the lane that they get off on that is the biggest problem in spite of all these factors? I mean, just not everybody who has a dysfunctional family, lives in a dysfunctional culture, shoots up school.
No, it's a matter of degrees. It's
okay.
It's a matter of how dysfunctional it is. And these killers that I've written about in this book all had extremely dysfunctional families. So it's a matter of that. And then culture, our culture right now. I believe there's more prejudice against white men than they are the scapegoats of society right now. And everybody, every group, gays, feminists, blacks, transgenders, they're all, making white males the scapegoat. And so these men grow up in this atmosphere, and they're not even allowed to defend themselves. If a white male says, well, you're just a white male saying that, so they can't even, say anything. And so that blocks them up even more and stirs their anger even more.
Well, as you said, and then they turn to power, and the gun is power in the way they see it. And they fantasize about it. I wonder too, like there's a nature to all these young men that they don't have girlfriends. Am I correct in that assumption?
Oh, yes, they have no.
So they're incels usually.
They're isolated. They don't have any girlfriends. They don't really relate to men, except that they become allies with other mass killers.
So weak men go to weak men. And see, this is the other reason I think is because my understanding is most of them don't have strong alpha fathers in the home, and they have father abandonment issues or whatever the case is. The father's been removed from the home, and so they don't have the example of a healthy alpha male, masculine male that teaches good masculinity and healthy masculinity to them, and so they're just lost boys, if you will. I don't know if you think that's.
Yes. We have a whole generation of lost boys now, for sure.
We do. I mean, when you see, how many the boys falling off, not going to college, not pursuing families, not dating. There's so many social problems to all that. You see that a lot of them can't afford to date or get married or have kids or get a house with, the economy being the way it is. But it's really interesting to me. We have these young men that don't want to go to college now, and women hypergamously date up. They date a guy who's in college or who's been to college. They date a guy who's got a successful career trajectory to raise a family with. And one of the problems that the Morgan Stanley thing cites is that these women aren't going to have someone above them who earns more than them hypergamously they can chase and secure for mating. They're going to be the top earners, and men aren't attracted to someone who earns more than them. So there's a real dynamic problem we have coming down the line in our society if young men aren't going to college.
They're not going to college, and women are not that interested in getting married, or many of them aren't dating right now because they can't find and they're told by feminists to make sure that everything's always equal, but what that means is that they control the relationship.
Yep.
And they You say that boys are lost, but I think that girls are lost too, in the sense that they've been led astray. They're up there now. They're high functioning, but I don't think they're good mothers, and I don't think they really realize what's happened to them, because many of them suffer from depression. There's research.
Oh, massive, yeah. I've been single all my life, and at 55, I'm still dating. And one thing that's interesting to me, I've kind of watched the arc of dating culture and mating. And before Sex and the City came out, there was a different sort of attitude of what women looked at me for. They looked at me as a provider and protector. And okay, can this guy have kids and be a family? And then it seems like Sex and the City, when it came out, it promised, hey, go run all over town. And then when you're done being on the town bicycle, Mr. Big will show up, the rich guy who's super good looking, and he'll scoop you up and save you from, I guess, old age or something. And that's when I saw things really change in the mindset of women, and other people have alluded to this as well. Now we have this narcissistic social media stuff that I think is really impacting women, because the addiction of the dopamine hit of attention and validation is huge. And you meet people that they can't get off the train. Like, they can't have an intimate relationship one-on-one where one man's attention and validation is good enough in a marriage. They've got the whole world, including guys from Dubai, who can DM them, and they can put up a sexy post and, get hundreds or thousands of DMs and likes. And I think it hurts women. I think it because it's a dopamine hit for them. And so it becomes like an addiction drug. You see women walking around, and they're on their phones 24/7. They almost don't look up anymore. And I see healthy relationships being broken up over social media. Some guy can just come into a DM of some woman who's married and start flirting with her, and she's bored in a 5-year marriage or whatever, and there you go. And then she's divorced, and then these kids are left on the street. But what I see now that's interesting to me is, when I was in my late 20s, almost 30s, I started dating women that were in their 20s that were coming out of divorces, and they had a half-cooked family, and I'm like, okay, all right, this seems, they got married at like 20 or 18 in their 80s. And here they are coming out of their thing. They've got their first family. And what's interesting is they were still young enough where they could easily get a second husband to help finish raising the kids and do the progression, because men look for beauty and femininity when we mate. So what's interesting to me is, now in my 50s, I see women in my 50s that are going through their very first divorce with a half-cooked family. And they're looking for men like me to wife them up, to take care of their family and finish the job. But I'm 55. I'm not looking to start over with a new family. And most men my age aren't. We're not looking, we've already done that. The family shipped, or, we've kind of shipped 2 families. We're looking to go retire and travel and stuff. And so I'm just in shock at how many of these families I see out in my dating marketplace that are in their 50s, and we're told things that, go ahead and wait, do your career. And you're just wondering what the end of that cycle is going to look like.
Yeah, well, as a therapist, I for 47 years I've been doing therapy.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like, as I've done it over the last few years, the people I've worked with have become more disturbed. The young people today have more disturbances than they used to have, say, when I first started in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
It's because the families are just falling apart. People are not as conscientious about being parents today as they used to be. They're more conscientious about their careers. Because you see, there's only an intrinsic reward in being a parent. You go up, you have a career, you get these external, tangible rewards, more money, promotions, all this kind of stuff. But parenting doesn't get these kind of rewards, so it's not as an attractive thing for women.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you see, we live in a divorce fat culture, is what I call it, where it's I've dated divorced women all my life, single mothers all my life. After about 28, it was all pretty much divorced single mothers, and you see this on social media, on Instagram, on YouTube, and other places. It's celebrated like it's a fad where it's like, hey, it's great, it's not that big of a deal. But they don't see the ugliness, the crying, and every now and then you'll see somebody get honest and go, this is really hard. I feel guilty. I made a mistake. Well, the reason you feel guilty is because you fucked it up. And you're screwing up your kids. I hate to be honest about it, but that's just it. My parents stayed together until we left the home. Were they the best parents that got along well and should have been together and had a great, happy marriage? No, they weren't. It wasn't all that great. But they did it for us. So we grew up with the masculine and the feminine in the home. And because we could see the dance that went on and the engagements, even the strife, we learn what it's like to have a masculine and feminine in the same home raising us so we could be shaped by it. Even though it wasn't perfect, we could see the fallacies of it and we learn from the fallacies of it. And that actually is important as well. So even if you're, and so now you see these people that they're just like, well, I'm not happy, or worse, I'm just bored. Yeah, I'm just bored. I miss going to clubs and doing whatever and, getting chased all over and attention and validation for everybody. I'm just bored. So I'm going to get divorced. 90% out of all the divorces right now, educated women are filing 90% of the divorces. If they're not educated, it's 80% of the divorces are filed by women. So you have to ask yourself, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, well, again, feminists have guided women towards, well, if it isn't working, get rid of him, move on. The men are always blamed for whatever problems there are in the family. Mm-hmm. Now, in my book, I wrote the last chapter is about how can we turn this around. Mm-hmm. I've advised some things. I don't think they're ever going to be done, but for example, I think that parents who want to have children should need to get a license to have children. You have to have a license to drive a car. You have to have a license to be a barber.
You've been saying something I've been saying for since I was 20, and this is the reason I didn't have kids. Okay. You should get a license, and you should have to go to college for 2 years to get educated, and you need to get all your psychoanalyst shit fixed before you can have kids.
You need parent training, and it could happen in college. I mean, you don't have any courses in college on how to live.
Yeah,
and those are what are needed. I think everybody should have a few years of therapy.
I agree.
But if parents were licensed, then these obvious people like schizophrenics or borderline personalities would not be able to have children. It's needed. But whenever you suggest that, there are always these people. Oh no, you can't interfere with parents. You can't ask them to be licensed.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been saying that for a long time. It's almost like a comedic joke where it's just like, hey, I don't know anything about parenting. You don't either. And we got all these traumas from childhood. Let's just drag them into a marriage and fuck up these kids.
And what happens is if you're abused as a child and you don't have any therapy, you're going to abuse your children. It goes again for generational
abuse, generational trauma as well. Yeah, I mean it's good that we have books like yours And like I say, when I discuss those with people, they always say to me the same thing. Well, according to what you're saying is, every child who grows up without a father, an alpha father, uh, should become a serial killer, and clearly they don't. So there's something wrong with your thing. It's the same analogy that you argue about guns being the killers of everybody. So, I mean, is there any way that we can identify? Is it just the right? Is it the right mindset of a person, or it's just the highly dysfunctional thing? Is it some of the people, some of these killers do seem to have some real mental health things where they just, I don't know, they were just born off the train or something. Maybe.
No, I don't believe they're born with it. I
Okay.
believe it's environmentally caused, and I think that they definitely, there's a lot of mental illness, and they, nearly all of these mass killers, they write things, they post things that say they're going to kill people. They always reveal what they're going to do. But
yeah, they warm it up, and everyone just ignores them.
People don't take them seriously.
Yeah.
This last guy in Texas I wrote about, in Uvalde, Texas, there was this mass killing. Mm-hmm. And people were calling him, they had a nickname for him, like the school killer or something. I mean, everybody knew, all his friends saw him that way, and he was constantly talking about it, but nobody did what they needed to do, which was to stop him.
That's the funny thing about, it's not really funny, but that's the interesting thing that's ironic, that about these killers is you'll interview him and people will be like, yeah, we always kind of knew he was going to go off the rails. It was just a matter of time. Let me ask you this. In the 80s, up until the 80s, we had a lot of mental health institutions around the country. When I grew up as a kid, if you were a teenager who had some problems, there was a mental health that was run by the county that they would send you to and put you in a room and give you some pills and all that sort of stuff. A lot of that system was disabled and disassembled by the Reagan administration in the 80s. And since then, you've kind of seen almost the same trajectory of rise going through of mental health problems in this country. Do you think that's a contributor, where we don't have enough mental health support in this country for these boys when they start showing signs of being problematic, that we can't really get them help, or there seems to be less ability to get them help?
Yeah, well, many of these mental health clinics, I kind of am very critical, and I've stated this in the book, of psychiatry. Mm-hmm. Psychiatry thinks that mental disorders are biological. Mm-hmm. And so they cite these theories, like the chemical imbalance theory. Mm-hmm. Everybody in psychiatry was saying that depression comes from a chemical imbalance, and what they meant was serotonin. That they thought that disturbed people didn't have as much serotonin. Mm. Well, that's been debunked now. It was never true. One psychiatrist wrote a theory about it, and everybody monkey see, monkey do. Uh-huh. It was never true, and they've now completely debunked it. And now they'll probably make up another theory as to why everything is biological. But because they want to think that way. They don't look at the complexity of human darkness.
Yeah. And of course, now we have the Board of Psychiatry claiming that masculinity is toxic in and of itself and needs to be removed from society. It's kind of interesting. The more women have gone to college and filled the psychiatry boards, how that's suddenly become a thing. And this is, if anything, we need to return to masculinity and logic and reason, because I think our society has just become too emotional. And where women can handle being emotional and they can handle freaking out, women aren't aggressive like men. Men are aggressive, and we are killers by our nature. That's our nature, as hunter-gatherers. We are killers. We were given upper body strength. We were given the penchant to kill, to succeed. Women were not. They're very passive in what they do, and they're designed to be different than us. But if you give in my opinion, if you give the right mixture of emotionalism without logic and reason, masculinity and healthy masculinity to a young man, he is going to react violently, and maybe he just becomes a problem person, or maybe he ends up in prison, or maybe he kills. But that's what we do. It's the wrong cocktail to give us as men. I don't know. That's my theory.
Well, yeah, I think it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the notion that men are, say, evil and women are good, that kind of prevails through fairy tales.
Yeah. And in our culture, it's everywhere. I mean, men are to blame for everything. Fathers are discounted in media and everything else.
But you see, women are violent psychologically.
Yeah.
I mean, the feminist movement, which continually complains about male bias towards women, but the feminist movement itself is one of the most biased against men movements that you'll ever find.
No, it's incredibly misandrous.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, I mean, our whole society is full of those kind of lies.
Yeah. I mean, it's widely accepted on social media that you can bash men all you want. There's like billions of views of how to manipulate men, how to abuse men. I've seen things about how men should be put into extinction. Kill all men. There's actually a hashtag for it. But if men even talk about women's nature or try to educate each other on women's nature, their accounts are removed and blocked, and the hashtags that can oppose those, the ones that are left up by women in the billions, are there. And I think these young boys, they grow up and they see this and they go, what the fuck? I'm the problem? Well, I'll give you what you want. I'll become the problem.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, there you go. Well, this has been really insightful. Give us your final thoughts on the book to pitch out to the audience as we go out, and your .com, Gerald.
Okay, well, I'll show you my book. This is the book. See if I can get it on.
Mm-hmm.
The Mass Killer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's available on Amazon and on what's that other place?
Barnes and Noble.
Barnes and Noble, yeah, it's available on all those places.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I think it's I hope it's a much needed book that sheds some needed light on this growing problem. And I hope that I hope I'll sell some copies from this show.
There you go. And I think everyone needs to read up about this and understand it. There's a reason it's young boys. Women aren't violent. Men are violent. Because that's in our nature. We're designed to be protectors. So we're designed to be violent if we need to protect our homestead, our wives, our children, our paternal interests. If we need to provide for our family, we're designed that way. And so there's a reason this is white young men doing this. And the more you look at it, the more, and the facts. I mean, if you don't believe me, go look at the facts. The data is all there. So there you go. Thank you very much, Gerald, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. Order the book, folks, wherever fine books are sold. The Mass Killer, 6 case histories that tell us why. Came out July 28th, 2023. Thank you, Gerald, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for having me. I just want to say that the book, people are reading it, and it's a page turner. I wrote the case histories so that they're very, very absorbing.
There you go.
I think it's a book that people will enjoy as well as will enlighten them. But anyway, thank you for having me on.
Thank you for coming. Thanks, my audience, for tuning in as well. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, YouTube.com/Chris Voss, and Chris Voss1 on TikTok. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you guys next time.